Celeb 20 news updates.
Celeb 20.
Ahead of the buzz.
All things celebrity.
So let's continue this story.
All right, everyone, ready for another deep dive?
Ready to go.
Okay, great. Today, we're diving into the world of Paul Reubens, the man behind the iconic Pee-wee Herman.
The one and only.
That's right, Pee-wee Herman. Now, you might think you know Pee-wee. You know, the gray suit,
The red bow tie.
the laugh.
Well, yeah.
But this deep dive is going to reveal some layers to the story, some surprising layers. We're going behind the persona. And our guide for this journey is the HBO documentary, Pee-wee as Himself.
I think what's so great about this documentary is how it contrasts the childlike joy of Pee-wee Herman with the real struggles that Paul Reubens was facing.
Yeah, it really pulls back the curtain.
Yeah.
The documentary uses his own words and a ton of archival footage to trace his journey.
Yeah.
But let's rewind.
Right.
Where does this character even come from?
Well, you got to go back to the late 1970s, the LA comedy scene. Reubens was part of the Groundlings.
Wow.
This legendary improv group.
Yeah.
And that's where Pee-wee Herman was born.
Wow.
And almost immediately, audiences were just hooked. I mean, this character, his humor, the look, the laugh, it was just magic.
Yeah, he really took off. And a few years later, 1985, Pee-wee's Big Adventure hits theaters.
Directed by Tim Burton.
Yeah, Tim Burton. It became an instant cult classic.
Oh, absolutely.
I was a kid when I saw that movie, but I still remember the tequila dance scene in the biker bar.
Oh, that's such a classic scene.
Oh, the energy.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so good.
It really just perfectly encapsulates Pee-wee's chaotic energy.
Yeah.
Like you said, he's in this biker bar. Just this explosion of joy.
Yes.
This surf rock music.
Yeah.
The choreography. I mean, it's all just brilliant.
Genius. And then, of course, came Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Well, yeah, Saturday morning TV was never the same.
Never the same.
I remember as a kid rushing to the TV every Saturday morning
Oh, yeah.
to watch this show.
Totally. It was just like this explosion of color.
Yes.
Surreal humor and such quirky character.
Yeah, good character.
It's like a world unto itself.
Yes.
You got talking furniture.
Yeah.
You got a talking globe, Cowboy Curtis dropping by. It's like stepping into a child's imagination, but with jokes that adults could appreciate.
Absolutely.
No wonder it won a bunch of Emmys.
Yeah. Hugely successful show.
Critical and commercial success.
Yeah.
But here's where things get interesting.
Okay.
And where this documentary really shines.
Yeah.
While Pee-wee was experiencing this meteoric rise to fame, Paul Reubens was grappling with some personal challenges that he kept very private.
Right.
And we're talking about his sexuality, right?
Yeah. And I think it's really important to think about the social context of the time, too. This was the 80s.
Yeah.
Being openly gay, especially in Hollywood, could really hurt your career.
Yeah, for sure.
And in the documentary, he talks about having many secret relationships and constantly being afraid of exposure. He even attributes some of his struggles with self-acceptance to having to keep up this image for the sake of Pee-wee.
And he says, fame was way more complicated than I ever imagined.
It's like the more successful Pee-wee became, the more trapped he felt.
He did. He said, I wasn't pursuing the Paul Reubens career. I was pursuing the Pee-wee Herman career. I hid behind an alter ego.
Yeah, that line, it really gets to the tension between his public persona and his private life. You could just feel the weight of that secret.
It's heartbreaking. And it makes you wonder, did creating Pee-wee help him express himself in a way he felt he couldn't otherwise?
That's a great question. And it makes the story of Pee-wee's inspiration even more fascinating. Because, the documentary reveals that Pee-wee was partly inspired by one of his former boyfriends.
Really?
A guy named Guy.
Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah. And a lot of his mannerisms and his kind of campy sayings, like, buttery, all those things kind of found their way into Pee-wee.
That's amazing. That adds a whole new layer to understanding Pee-wee's voice.
Right. And camp, by the way, is like, it's a way of describing something that's so over the top and exaggerated that it becomes humorous.
Yeah.
Like a lot of Pee-wee style.
Yeah, totally. But knowing about Guy, it also makes the story a bit bittersweet, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because Reubens admits that as his career took off, he kind of stepped back into the closet.
Yeah.
And his relationship with Guy suffered.
He does. He says, I was out of the closet and then I went back in the closet. And it's a really sad admission.
Yeah.
It really speaks to the impossible choices he felt he had to make at the time. And then to make matters even worse, He shares this story about visiting Guy in the hospital when he was dying of AIDS.
Oh, what?
And he describes seeing him at death's door, and you could just hear the emotion in his voice.
Wow. That must have been incredibly difficult for him to deal with that grief while maintaining this public persona and this career. It just adds another layer of complexity to his story.
It really does.
And speaking of complexity, we can't talk about Paul Reubens without addressing the scandals that really impacted his career, especially that 1991 arrest.
Right. That arrest for indecent exposure. I mean,
Yeah, it was a media frenzy, wasn't it?
Oh, totally.
It's like one minute he's this beloved children's entertainer, and the next he's facing all this scrutiny and judgment.
Yeah, the contrast is pretty wild, isn't it? I mean, Reubens himself even talks about it in the documentary, like going from being Pee-wee Herman to having, what he calls his Charlie Manson mugshot plastered everywhere.
Wow.
It's a crazy reminder of how quickly public opinion can change.
Yeah, he talks about how he lost his anonymity overnight, which I can't even imagine, especially for someone in the public eye. And he's really honest about how much that arrest affected him even years later.
He says he feels the effects all the time.
Wow.
And that it's shocking to him how many people still make assumptions based on this one incident.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the lasting power of those kinds of judgments.
For sure.
Even when charges are dropped, like in this case.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder to look beyond the headlines and remember that there's a person behind those stories.
Always.
And then Reubens faced another setback in 2002 with the possession of what were considered inappropriate materials.
Yeah, and those charges were reduced, but it definitely still impacted his career.
It makes you wonder how things might have been different for him if he had felt more comfortable being open about his sexuality from the beginning.
Right, but those what ifs.
Yeah.
They're hard to know, right?
They are, yeah.
But what's amazing to me is how resilient he was. He just never gave up on entertaining.
He didn't give up, and luckily, audiences were ready to welcome him back.
Yeah.
He went on to have some great roles.
He did. I mean, Blow with Johnny Depp.
Oh, yeah.
That was a great movie.
And Mystery Men, that superhero comedy.
Yes.
So funny.
So good.
And then there was the Broadway revival of the Pee-wee Herman show. Wait,
I saw that.
you did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was incredible.
Wow. It's really a testament to his enduring appeal,
Yeah.
The fact that his creativity transcended all those difficult chapters in his life.
And it shows you that his talent was always there.
Yeah.
Even when it was overshadowed by all the controversy.
Sure.
Which brings us back to Pee-wee as himself.
Yeah.
This documentary.
Yes.
It seems like this was a very deliberate project for him.
Yeah.
Like he wanted to, take back control of his story. And finally let people see the real him.
He did. He wanted people to see beyond the headlines, beyond the Pee-wee persona, to understand Paul Reubens, the man.
Exactly. And there's this one part where he says, more than anything, the reason I wanted to make a documentary was for people to see who I really am.
It's a powerful statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially considering how much he felt he had to hide for so long. He talks about how painful it was to be labeled something he wasn't, how much he struggled with that public perception.
Right, and it adds this whole other level to his story. But while the documentary does cover the difficult stuff, it also celebrates, all the joy that he brought to the world. And it really shines a light on all the people that supported him through everything.
I loved those parts of the documentary, like seeing his friendships with Debbie Mazar and Phil Hartman.
Yes.
You can just tell that they meant so much to him.
They were so important to him.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's interested in, the creative process.
Oh, yeah.
There's some really fascinating behind-the-scenes looks at how Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Pee-wee's Playhouse were made.
Oh, I love that stuff, all those little behind-the-scenes nuggets.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that this documentary is going to be on Max,
Me too.
It feels like a story that deserves a wide audience.
Absolutely. Anyone who grew up with Pee-wee Herman should see this film.
Yeah.
It's a must-see. Anyone who's interested in fame or identity, the person behind the mask,
It's interesting to think that even though Paul Reubens is gone, Pee-wee Herman still holds a special place in pop culture.
Yeah. It makes you think about how art can outlive the artist.
It does. And we can appreciate the humor and the creativity of Pee-wee Herman while also recognizing, the complexities of Paul Reubens.
Exactly.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Nope.
This deep dive has really given me a new perspective on both Paul Reubens and Pee-wee Herman. It's a story of immense talent, but also incredible struggle. And ultimately, this search for authenticity. And for those listening, I'm curious, how has knowing more about Paul Reubens' personal journey changed your view of Pee-wee Herman, if at all? I mean, does it deepen your appreciation for the character, knowing, the challenges that he faced behind the scenes, or does it maybe complicate things a little bit?
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about, right?
Yeah.
Like, we often try to separate the art from the artist, but I think sometimes understanding the creator's life can add, a new dimension.
Yeah, definitely. Their work. For me, it really has. I think knowing his story, his struggles with identity and acceptance, it makes Pee-wee's, unapologetic weirdness and that celebration of individuality even more powerful, It's like he created this world where being different wasn't just okay, but it was something to be celebrated.
Totally. And it speaks to the power of art, really, to create these spaces belonging, even when the artist themselves is struggling.
Yeah. It's like Pee-wee was this safe space for him to express himself.
Yeah.
Even if it was indirectly. And for us as viewers, it became this safe space to just embrace our own quirks.
Yeah, embrace our individuality.
Totally.
And I think that's why he still resonates with people of all ages, right?
Totally.
There's just something universal about, wanting to be accepted for who you are.
Absolutely.
Even if you're a little different.
Yeah, a little strange, a little bit out there. And that's what makes this documentary so powerful, I think.
Yeah.
It reminds us that, behind the masks that we wear, behind the personas that we project, we're all complex individuals with our own stories.
We are. It's a good reminder to be a little more empathetic with each other.
Yeah.
And understand you never really know the full story.
Yeah, so well said. So if you're looking to understand Paul Reubens and the legacy of Pee-wee Herman, check out Pee-wee as Himself.
It's a great film.
When it hits Max. It's a wild journey, really.
It is.
It'll make you think. It'll make you laugh.
Sure.
It might even inspire you to embrace your own inner Pee-wee.
Maybe.
Well, that is a perfect note to end on.
I think so.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
As we explored the life and legacy of Paul Reubens, the man behind the icon, Pee-wee Herman. And until next time, keep asking questions.
Keep exploring.
And keep diving deep.